with the professional VMware.com vBrownbag US edition. It is Wednesday, January 29th, 7:30 p.m. Central. Tonight we're going to be talking about the VMware VCAP-DCA bootcamp that Mr. John Arrasjid and Mostafa Khalil are going to be doing at PEX, the VMware Partner Exchange Conference. Before we get started, I want to run through a few quick notes. You can join us online. You can follow us at the Twitter account at vBrownbag. Additional vBrownbag, Twitter accounts we have are vBrownbag LATAM and vBrownbag EMEA. And of course the Twitter hashtag vBrownbag. You can check out all the stuff that we've been doing at professionalvmware.com/brownbags. So again, our guests tonight are Mr. John Arrasjid. He is at VCDX001 from VMware, and also Mostafa Khalil from VMware. He is at Mostafa BMW on Twitter. And again, my name is Damian Carlson, 6-foot dad. I'm the most annoying host on the planet. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you guys, John and Mostafa, if you'd like to introduce yourselves. And John, am I going to be giving you the presenter ball?
Yes. Do you want it? So I guess what I'll do is I'll be able to control your presentation. Is that correct? Or do you want me to use my presentation? I can do either.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll make you the presenter.
Okay. Sounds good.
All righty. There you go. If you guys would like to introduce yourselves.
Sure. My name is John Arrasjid. I am a principal architect. I'm also VCDX #1 with a big focus on helping architects as well as admins achieve advanced certification. And I also have Mostafa on. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Mostafa Khalil. I'm a technical support director at VMware, VCDX #2. And at VMware, I'm leading the solution architects team at the vCloud Hybrid Services.
So what we're going to be covering today is similar to the other two boot camps that we've done in the series before on the VCAP design and VCDX. I guess we're kind of working backwards from the highest level back to the first of the VCAP certifications. In this particular case, it's the VCAP admin boot camp. This is actually only the third time we've offered this. It's the first public offering of it, so thank you, Damien, and the rest of the team from vBrownbag for allowing us to do that. We are going to focus on the three areas and provide examples. We will also cover a little bit about the blueprints, but I always want to defer people to the official blueprints for the version of the exam that you're going to be taking. We're going to provide some tips, some best practices, but the one thing that we won't be doing in this series that's already been covered in a very well format is what others have done on vBrownbag and in other forums on the details of specific VCAP admin certifications like the DCA, the CIA, and the DTA. So the way I've got it broken down is to cover basically the certification program and the process. That I may go a little bit quicker on because I think many of you have seen that if you participated in past boot camps. But it gives you an understanding of where the VCAP admin fits into the whole scheme of our certification tracks. We then go through the VCAP Administration blueprints with some examples of what you should focus on in particular areas. Because we've actually got three tracks here and there's three separate blueprints, we're going to try to cover the high level. And since this will be available for access on both the vBrownbag site and on the VMware site very shortly, you can get that and read additional details in there. We're going to try to be careful and make sure we can get to the examples within the time frame we're talking about. We're looking at maybe with just a little over the 1 hour that we scheduled for. Damien, I'll let me know if we start running into a wall on the time, and I'll make sure we fit it all in.
Sure. I don't have a hard stop, so feel free to do what you need to.
Sounds good. And the last area is on the next steps and some of the resources and references that you can actually get, including some of the material that's already been presented here in the past on the vBrownbag series. So we've done our introductions. One thing I would like to do, is it possible, Damon, for you to see by a hand raise on what our audience types are if I ask people to raise their hands for the different categories?
Yeah, I can do a quick poll. Bear with me here.
So the poll that I'd like to find out is several things. First off, are you an administrator or an architect? And basically, to understand what your goal is, are you looking at going all the way up to the top level of the admin tracks or the VCDX tracks for architect?
All right, give me one moment. I actually have to do this through the web. So what are the options, John?
So administrators, architects, or other, as far as the role that people play or the interest areas that they have. So in Mustafa's case and my case, we actually kind of fit in both areas, although currently I'm doing more on the architect side and less on the administration side.
So administrators, architects, or others, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So what's your current work role or area of interest?
Yep.
All righty.
And part of the reason for doing this is to get an idea as I go through the material with Mustafa. It'll help us provide some additional background tailored to the people who are on the call.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll, everyone, and just feel free to answer, and we'll see it live.
Sure. And while you're doing that, I'm going to start talking about the certification program for sake of time, and then we'll come back when the poll is over, and we can talk a little bit about that. So first off, the certification program and process, we're going to talk about what are the reasons for getting to certification. We talk about how this can be of value to any individual, but also specifically from our perspective, the customers as well as the partners. These are the types of things that we hear back from management teams as well as individuals that are achieving these higher level certifications. The primary thing is the validation that you understand what is considered minimally qualified or beyond minimally qualified in the particular certification area that you're testing. And the idea is to give you a, I guess I'll call it a competitive advantage. I think many of you who are going through certification understand that the goal for our advanced certifications isn't just to have a collection of certificates. It's to make sure that the individual operating as an advanced architect or an advanced administrator can actually do the job that we see as important for the solutions that we offer with VMware technologies. When we look at the program structure, we see a setup based on role bases. Basically, if an individual is an architect, an administrator, or having some other role, how do we align the certification areas? And what we've done is we've created 4 solution tracks. We've got the cloud, data center, virtualization, and desktop mobility. There are some names that are changing there. Oh, sorry. There are some names that are changing the desktop area, so that you may see some updates over the course of the next year or so as we finalize what we're doing in the mobility space. There is a new area, a new track that we are developing with the networking business unit, which is on network virtualization. That's something that is coming soon, but I don't have any specific details right now. So for the core of the people on the call, you'd probably be looking at one of the first 3 that I mentioned here, cloud, data center, virtualization, and desktop mobility. Another note that I'll make is as you see VMware evolving with this new software-defined data center, I think you'll see more and more overlap between what we originally called cloud and data center virtualization. And the reason is there's a lot of flexibility in what we're trying to do with tools like vCloud Automation Center, Orchestrator, and App Director to actually, I guess I'll call it merging the two areas. Now, we have 4 achievement levels. We have the VMware Certified Associate. This is actually one of our newest level certifications. This is how do you talk the talk? How do you understand what the technology is about without having to do installations and configurations? Then we go on to the VMware Certified Professional. This is where you take a class, you learn the install and configure, and you actually go through lab work and basically demonstrate your skill as an administrator. The next level is on the VCAP Advanced Professional. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the next slide, but this is definitely something that requires field experience, experience in using the environment, developing and designing the environment. And then the very last area is the VMware Certified Design Expert, and this is what we consider our top level for the architect track. So on the certification level, this is a little bit further explanation. I'll let you guys take a look at this and read it, but I want to do one comparison. A lot of people talk to us about how does this compare with certifications like CCIE, CCNP, CCDP. Think of the CCIE and the CCDP at the VCAP admin and VCAP design levels. And then think of the Cisco Certified Architect level at the VCDX level. That's how we look at it. It's not exactly apples to apples, but we look at the type of validation we're looking for in alignment with those types of tracks. Now from the survey, I see we've got 30 out of 36. So 32% are admins, 61% are architects, and there's a number of other individuals in different roles. I'm going to assume it could be management, it could be project leads, things like that. When we look at those of you attending this call, I see most likely the people that are doing the administration likely going for the VCAP admin. Maybe they stop at that level, and the architects moving forward to the VCAP design and the VCDX level. But I want to let people know there is no limit on where you can go in the certification track. It's basically tied to the amount of time you have and the type of projects you work on. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. One last slide that I wanted to cover on the certification is something that we call the progression going from the entry level, I guess I'll call it the professional level, all the way up to the vExpert level, and what are some of the shortcuts that you can take to reduce the amount of time and the number of certifications to achieve the top level. So first off, you need to have a VCP to progress to the next level at VCAP admin, or sorry, VCAP, the VMware Certified Professional level. If you take a VCP at any one of these three track areas, you can take the VCAPs in any of the three. So you could start with VCP-DCV and say, hey, you know, I want to go take the desktop track. And what you can then do is take the VCAP certifications, the DTA and the DTD. By taking the DTA, you would inherit the VCP desktop. You have to have one VCP to start the process, but we make it easier to acquire the extra VCP certifications if you achieve certain minimum requirements. And we call that the rules of inheritance. The second thing is, if you go all the way through on one track to the VCDX level, there's another shortcut to achieve VCDX in another category. You take the VCAP design level in the alternate track, and you submit a design for that alternate track. You don't have to go through the VCDX defenses. What you have to do is pass the exam and get accepted for the design that you submit based on our scoring rubric. If you do that, you achieve the new VCDX certification in the new track. But it does not automatically give you the DTA or the VCAP administration or the VCP levels. Those would require the other path that I mentioned earlier. So when we look at what we're trying to test here, it's both administration and operational skills, and included as part of that are troubleshooting skills related to the administration and operation. I've got color coding going forward, but I'm going to call these out just in case you have trouble with viewing the colors that I have here. The first one is the data center administration, which I've got color coded as green. Desktop administration color coded as, I'll call it orange. And cloud infrastructure administration, which is a purplish blue. Your mileage may vary based on your screen. So what are some of the reasons why people pursue the administration certification? One is to validate the individual's capability and to help them in the value they offer to whether it's a customer or to the organization they work in. And the idea is to validate what we believe are the minimum requirements to be successful. It doesn't mean you have to know everything, but you have to understand what is considered the minimally qualified levels And this is across the average of the entire exam. So you may be weak in one area, but you can make up for it in other areas in that case. The other thing is looking at some of the prerequisites. We have a number of things that are prerequisites that I mentioned previously for VCAP, which is the VCP, but this is one essential piece for the VCGX program as well. Why administration for design? It's because you have to understand how to use the technology and run the operations to make sure the design you create is implementable and usable and will meet the needs of the administrators that have to run it. So what is included in these three types of VCAP admin exams? Well, these are all lab-based. We use a VMware-based virtual infrastructure. We do use real ESX servers on hardware, not virtualized ESX. That way we can test things out such as direct path and things like that as part of some of the labs if they come up. We do expect that you have hands-on experience. In many cases, if you have a good lab, you could go through everything you need to pass this exam. Having field experience working in a real customer environment will give you additional experience, and using the hands-on labs that are offered through VMware, that can give you some great practice and also to learn some of the newer technologies. When you take the VCAP admin, it does need to be, you need to get approval for taking it, where we check the prerequisites, and you have to have it scheduled through Pearson VUE. And I'll talk a little bit about why we have to do this special scheduling. Now, a lot of it has to do with the infrastructure required for the lab environment. Now, we're going to talk about the typical challenges that we see for candidates. And Mostafa, I'll let you jump in on any of these areas that you want to add on to, because I think, you know, between the two of us, we probably have a number of different things that we can provide our experience levels on to help candidates. First is the length of the exam, the number of labs. We expect you to pace your time. Completion of the labs and the complexity of the labs are all going to be dependent upon scenarios that have specific tasks inside of those. And you can get partial credit. Mostafa, do you want to talk a little bit about what you had mentioned in the past session we did on why it's important to be careful about how you build out?
Yeah, sure. So depending on the type of the question, we're going to cover the styles or types of questions in later slides. You need to make sure that you answer the questions based on their type. So if the question is single choice, then it will be a radio button, for example. Multiple choice will tell you how many questions you want.
But sorry, Mostafa. Mostafa, you're jumping onto the other one. So on the admin one specifically for the lab, for the scenarios for the labs.
Right. So for the labs, you're talking. There are certain tasks. There are certain tasks that you would need to do first, and if you make some errors in these tasks, you may end up having difficulties completing the later tasks in the lab. So whatever task you accomplish, it's not just a single score. What we do is that we compare the state before and after, and it doesn't matter how you got to accomplish the task, we will see the end result. So you need to make sure that you accomplish that task by any of the means that you're familiar with. So if you're more comfortable with scripting, you can do that. If you're comfortable with editing files, you can do that. But certain configurations require that you do the change via the UI so that certain configuration files in multiple areas are changed or are correctly applied. So whatever task that you accomplish, you would get a partial score for as much as you did. And if it's dependent, if later tasks are dependent on this one, you need to be careful what you do so that you'll be able to accomplish the future tasks.
Now, another thing that we run across is with challenges is the live labs that we're talking about and some of the potential latency considerations. For most people that are testing in North America, we don't usually see latency issues, but we sometimes have it at remote locations in some countries. I'm not sure if anyone here is affected by that, but if you are, one of the things that you can do is talk to the people running it. If there is latency, they can do, I guess, a basic test to see if there is truly a latency issue, and I believe that you can get some time extension. Mustafa, do you remember how that works?
I can speak to it if you want, Mustafa.
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, it's Linus. My clock was all out of whack.
No worries.
So depending upon the situation, this is done on an as situation occurs kind of scenario, in that depending upon whether it's determined that it's an issue with our environment, whether it's an issue with where the location is, etc. So it'll be on a case-by-case basis. They may extend the time, but the most important thing is to, as you mentioned, is to raise the issue as soon as possible. Raising the issue after the fact does not, it makes it impossible for us to be able to address it. There is certain latencies, because the reality is that the lab environment is in the U.S., which means that if you're anywhere outside the U.S., you get to travel around the planet to get to the lab environment. So that's, part of the challenge. Most places are okay, but now and again we do find some areas or particular regions that just sort of, not happy kind of thing. Yeah. So does that help answer the question?
I think that actually does provide. The idea here is we're trying to make sure that if there are issues with the testing environment, that we have a way of resolving the problem. But it does have to be addressed right away, as Linus was saying. By the way, Linus is the one who's been focused specifically on the desktop area and helping on putting the presentation for this. Sorry, we didn't get a chance to do an introduction, so if you want to do a quick one, you can let people know what you do. Yeah.
My name is Linus Bork. I have been with VMware for over 8 years now. I am a senior technical instructor for VMware Education. I'm part of a special team known as the America's Tech Lead Team, which specializes in doing customer on-sites, but as well as helping out in various different areas of VMware, such as certification, curriculum development, etc. And I'm also an author of the VCP desktop book, working on the second edition, of course. It's non-stop process. And I'll be at PAX for anyone that's going to be there.
And the other thing that I want to cover real quick is lack of internet access for reference. We don't provide internet access to look up documents, how-tos, knowledge base articles, and so on. But in each test environment that you have, there will be a folder with PDF documentation. And we're going to give you a screenshot of what's included in those folders. They include white papers, how-to guides, knowledge base articles, as well as product documentation. Keep one thing in mind, although these are available for you to use, they're not your first option. They're your last option in case you need to validate something or look up something that you don't know. If you rely on that documentation for completing the exam, it'll be pretty challenging to go through all the material. We're going to talk about the VCAP admin blueprints, and I think what we'll do is break this. Oh, sorry. Yes?
I've got a couple quick questions if we can.
Oh, sure. Yes.
First up, let's see. I had one come in on Twitter earlier. Let me run back over there. And you don't necessarily have to address this right now, but I just kind of wanted to get it in.
Was it the one on cloud governance?
The one on cloud governance is one of them, yes. Another one, James Green wanted to know when the exam will be updated for 5.5. So you can address that whenever you can.
Okay, so first off, let me address that right now. So the cloud governance one is something that we have proposed right now. I guess I'll say it's in a holding pattern because we have a few things that we have to work out on how to approach what we need to cover. And does it actually align in the tracks that we currently have, or is it a special case? And I'll give you the perspective of the people that have been talking about this, and it's governance actually can apply to more than just the cloud. It can apply to a number of different areas. It's got security, process and workflows, business continuity, and things like that. So we're trying to work out what the right approach is to offer that. So I'll offer an apology because I know we've had that listed for a while and it's coming soon, but we're still trying to work out the details because of the overlap, the complexity, and we don't think there's going to be specifically a direct map to a VCAP or a VCDX cert. It's something that actually overlaps both of those areas. So that's on the cloud governance piece. On the other one that was on when will the updates, was that for a particular track? I didn't see the exact question. Was that for one of the 3 tracks?
I think the question is for DTA.
Yeah, James didn't specify.
So Linus,
say VCP.
what can you talk about? So I'll let Linus talk about the desktop because I know he's working on the updates for that. Is there anything that you can share on that?
Sorry, not the DTA, the DCA. Sorry, confused. It's probably the V-Certify-5 which is in the works currently. So it will come out, but they're working on it. So it does take time because the environment has to be validated, confirmed, and tested, et cetera, because we'll make sure that all of the things work well, and then do the questions make sense with the updated version. So it's in the works. When it comes out, we'll announce.
Watch the certification site, and the MyLearn site. That's where we'll have the updates when they're available. There's another question too that I saw that says docs available for VCP2 from Graham Mitchell. I think that question is, if you're taking the VCP, do you get access to any of the docs? Right now, there's no plans on doing that. The reason why we did it for the VCAP admin was because of the significant complexity in that exam and the length of the exam and basically the things that you need from an advanced administrator. Doesn't mean you have to memorize everything, so that's why those references are available there as well. On the VCP, there's more on the memorization. And I think there was one other one. Let's see here. Which takes precedence? An activity that has specifics. Wait, sorry. That specifies to do something specific. Do you make a change later in your solution or modify the VM resource requirements? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Mark, could you try to rephrase that? Mark Trimble? So I'm assuming that it's precedence for.
My guess is scoring.
So for scoring, remember that each of these scenarios have a build out, so there is partial scoring available. If we are looking for something to be done in the process and there is a point value associated with that, then we will look to get that. But all the instructions are very clear on what's required. If there's a question, double check the instructions and the details should be in there. I think, Linus, I think we had this, we had talked about this before, I think. This was actually related to sequencing. So if there's like 3 steps or 5 steps, or maybe it was Mostafa that had talked with me about that, you may have to do things in a certain set of sequences, and they have to, certain things have to be correct for you to be able to do full scoring later on.
Yeah.
So yeah, but these are for individual items, not within the same set of tasks. So one question can have one or more tasks, and then the following question may have tasks that build up upon what you did in the previous one. So
sorry, Mostafa, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, so each item is scored separately from the other items, and within each item, if there is multiple tasks, each task may have a certain number of points, and if you accomplish all the tasks, you get all the points for that question. But if you miss some of them, not just that you're going to get a partial score for this one, it may affect the score on the following one because you may not be able to accomplish the task since the prerequisites are not done.
Yeah. Although we do try to minimize those. So the most obvious kind of one is if we start off, asking you to build a data center with these ESXi hosts within it and stuff like that. That's kind of the obvious one that comes to mind. If you don't build a data center, you can't do the rest of the actual questions.
Exactly. So hopefully that.
Try to avoid
So hopefully that addresses the questions. If we didn't catch the questions correctly, please rephrase them, and at the next opportunity, we'll go ahead and try to get those answered. So first off, the admin blueprints are all available directly through either vmware.com/certification or through MyLearn. I believe one is a redirect to the other. And we have the 3 sets of blueprints for VCAP administration. This actually talks a little bit about what we cover, but think of the data center administration focused on vSphere, cloud administration, currently on vCloud Director, but as we go forward and we evolve the vCloud suite, you'll see more of vCloud Automation Center included in that, but right now it's still based on vCloud Director. And the third area is on the desktop administration, and this is where we look at building solutions with View, but also some of the other supporting technologies. And one of the things that people ask us when we look at all 3 of these, how do they all relate to each other? Well, I think when we look at these, data center virtualization and the data center administration is the foundation that the other 2 get built on. And you'll see a lot of designs that will actually show that as a breakout. Either you have a full desktop design with vSphere integrated, or you see 2 designs that are linked. One is the foundation with vSphere, and the other one is desktop built on top of that. We're not going to go in as much detail on the cloud infrastructure piece, but I want to give Linus a chance to talk just a little bit more on the desktop area and what he sees, given that that's something that he's specialized on.
So this one is, I believe we just finished and we just released the DTA for this version.
Just recently, I think, yeah.
Yeah, if I remember correctly. So again, this is a heavily leaning towards View at this time, and at some point in the future, it'll probably, who knows what we might include in it. But for now, it's about building a View environment. If you've gone through the class and you've done all the labs that are related to the class, this should be pretty much a straightforward. There are some things that require a little more fancier stuff, like if you have to assign GPOs, etc. But much like anything else, it's do the hands-on, the day-to-day kind of thing. And again, there is some stuff that's built on. Now, one thing I'd watch, read the instructions carefully. We do ask you not to build out certain link clones and stuff simply because of potential timing issues. For that reason, we deliberately, we just ask you to build, say, necessarily the pool, size it accordingly, but don't actually enable it, kind of thing. Don't enable provisioning. So watch for those things. We'll do it for certain pools, but we won't for all. Certain questions we won't do for all. So do watch for those kinds of things. So, read your questions, as I like to say to my students, read the questions 3 times. That way you understand it. So that's pretty much what sort of comes to mind for that one.
Hey, there's a question that came up that's related, and I think I have an answer for it. It says, isn't the VCAP a little easier since it's all hands-on? The question is, I think the question is probably, is the VCAP admin easier than the VCAP design? It all depends on the role that you have.
Yeah.
If you do administration day in, day out, I think the VCAP admin will be easier than the design. If you do design day in, day out, and you're not doing as much on the administration, you may be challenged on some of the labs for the administration side. My personal background, I've been focusing more on the design, so I think for me, I have a harder time on the administration one than I would on the design exam. Hopefully that answers your question.
I would agree with that, definitely, as someone who spends a lot of time on hands-on, and although I've done some design, going in and doing the design exam was sort of like, oh, that's completely outside of my scope of day-to-day comfort. So I think part of it is if we compare it, say, even to the VCP, a lot of people look at the VCAP-DTA or DCA or CIA in some ways easier because it's what they do day-to-day, so they're able to do the visual side of it, which is something that we often learn by, which is pictures, right?
And that's one of the reasons why we've actually focused on using labs for this particular exam, because we're trying to test those advanced skills that you just can't do on paper or on a question-answer basis. It actually requires some exercises. And so that's why we followed that approach that we see in like a Cisco certified internet engineer.
Yeah, I would like to add also that if you're not comfortable with hands-on, if your role is mostly designed, it would be very easy for you to go through the blueprint items for the admin exam, and any item that you don't feel comfortable with, make sure that you go through a live lab that you can go follow the steps of accomplishing such a configuration until you're comfortable with it, and you can time yourself in a way that how long does it take you to start to finish, and any items that you're not comfortable with, that you don't find documentation for it, we always have in the blueprints the actual links to the supporting tools or documents, which should make it easy for you to identify them and find them.
Hey, Mostafa, I have a question from Dan McGee here that I think you might be able to answer pretty well. It says, considering the VCAP lab stats are scored at the end, is it wise to never wait for a process to finish 100% before moving on unless absolutely necessary?
It is not wise. It is wise to wait, but most of the tasks that we set in the labs, I don't think take that long. And by the time you finish reading the second question, the following question, the process probably would have been completed. So once the task is in the queue and is being processed, move on to the next question and read through it. This way, if you need to look up some documentation, by the way, this is an open exam, open book exam, but we provide you all the resources on the desktop itself. You're not going to have access to the internet. So if you don't remember something, you can search for it quickly in the provided documentation while this process is completing.
Yep. So the key thing that we're looking for is skills in installation, configuration, administration, and troubleshooting. And when we look at the actual length and complexity of these exams, you'll notice that we have a different number of live labs. Each, as I said before, each of those have tasks, and in many cases they're cumulative. Also, right now you'll see that the data center and cloud infrastructure administration exams are 210 minutes, and the desktop is 180 minutes. My understanding is that that time frame will actually end up being exactly the same going forward with the next releases that are coming up. I believe the desktop one will be changed to a 210-minute, I think. Is that correct, Linus?
Yeah.
Mark Brunstad had said that we were working to try to get them to have the same length of time, even though there might be different number of labs.
We're trying to, because one of the challenges that we run into, so one of the processes, and I know because Josh is somewhere in the audience listening, is that we will run through practice versions of it before we even go to beta, just to see how long it takes. Some of the sections we think it's going to take too long, and then adjust what we think for that one. So we try to estimate it. And the beta, when we run betas for these, is usually where we figure out, roughly, we'll need X number of questions to be able to map it out. We try to map everything out.
In relation to the MQC leveling that we look at.
Yeah. So we try to keep it as close to that time. As Mostafa mentioned, he said practice and practice and practice, and I would really second that because, as much as we try to keep that to time, assuming that you were able to go through everything, the one thing we don't incorporate in that is the amount of time that you take to try and search for something. So if you have to search for something, you're going to end up eating your own time. So yes, it's open book, but you really should avoid going to the open book unless you're really, really desperate and there's no quick help kind of option as part of that command or that feature, whatever it is. So I would really encourage you to follow what Mostafa suggested, which is do all of that sort of prep and reading through before you get to the exam itself. I think a lot of people make the mistake that with an online exam like this, that's easy because that's what they do day to day. And to a degree, it may be in some senses, but there's probably a lot of things that you don't do as part of your day-to-day that we've included in the exam that maybe other people do as part of their day-to-day. So it's really, really important to sort of emphasize that. So yeah, I believe it's a 225 plus whatever extra time is allotted for those where English is not their native language.
Yeah, exactly. Let me run through a couple of things. That Sorry. Go ahead, Mostafa.
I guess I got a delay. Sorry about that, Josh. I just wanted to add that, one part about that that's kind of an interesting irony is that if you're following the blueprint and looking at that when preparing for the DCA or one of the administration exams, you're going to be referencing the same documents that are going to be available to you. So if you actually study and prepare using those documents, if you have to go back and refer to them, you should have a pretty fair understanding of where things are in the document to reduce your time. And now, for me, when I took it, it was very helpful to know the things that I didn't know as well, where I felt weaker, and just have those documents ready on cue and just know where things were.
Yep.
Sorry, John, before you go forward, not Josh here that's hosting, but Josh, one of our certification guys, just sent me a note. Apparently, I guess there's a new time limit for the DTA and DCA, which is 3 hours. So that has been changed. So I don't know if the blueprint's been updated for that, but
okay.
The 225 may not be necessarily accurate. It may be actually a 3-hour window.
Wow. It used to be 4, didn't it?
It was, and I just scheduled one of my exams, and I'm sure of it. It said 4 hours, but
well, I'll tell you what. I will do a check on that and get an update, and I can put it in the deck and send that back to you guys so you can update it on your site.
Okay, so it's 180.
I'm thinking there might be. Sorry.
What was it you were thinking? What?
Oh, I was just going to say I'm thinking there might be a good market in a Power CLI script that does the test for you in 5 minutes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I saw that post. I like that. Hey, we have another one. I think it's more of a humor question. My apologies if it isn't, but it says, on average, how much of a pay jump is it going from VCP to VCAP? And I'm making an assumption that the question is, if I've got VCP and I make X dollars, what does VCAP buy me? So I don't have exact numbers for that. What I do know is that the opportunities that you can get in different work environments can give you the ability to earn more, but everybody's mileage will vary, so I don't think I have an exact answer for something like that. But it's definitely something that we've seen, and especially when people get up to the VCTX level, we see that the demand is pretty high, and yeah, that's one of the challenges. We're trying to get more individuals out there with VCTX because the demand is so high.
Well, I can add something to that.
Yep.
Apparently, those that, and this was, random survey that was done back in 2013 in April, those that get a VCAP, their average salary is $116,000 a year.
Yeah, but you have to do location. Right. Yeah, let's not get too much into the salaries, but you have to use that as one point based on where that survey was done and what type of company and all that stuff. The best way I found is to basically look through the community forums if you want to actually find out information like that. I don't think we're necessarily in the business of being able to provide details. So let me run through into, I want to make sure we stay on track for time because I want to make sure that we finish no later than the top of the hour. So let me continue on here. Some tips. In the blueprints, there are several sections that are labeled as knowledge, skills and abilities, and tools. All of those different areas have important, valuable pieces of information or references that can help you. You may not be able to read everything that's all referenced in every area of the blueprint, but trying to understand as much as you can on those categories will give you some good chance for success. The other thing is, I give you a little information here on passing score. This is a number that gets created. It will change over time, but people talk about how is this test created? Is it based on certain questions you answer one way? Does it change the questions? No, you actually answer questions in a test pool, and we have what's considered the minimally qualified candidate score, which is the cutoff for passing. So basically, we have a number of formulas that go behind that. I'm not going into the details, but the bottom line is you will get your results. They basically say provided within 15 business days. Somebody had said about getting a score at the test. I thought that was not currently the way it went. I thought it was you get the full score 15 days later. Is that right, Josh?
You get the full score 15 days later.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
That's business days, right?
Yes, it's business days, assuming that certification isn't overwhelmed because of VMworld or anything like that.
Yes, it's very much business days.
Yeah.
So
Second thing I wanted to
3
cover is,
calendar weeks.
let's go with 15 business days because the calendar weeks may change based on holidays and things like that. Retake policy. If you take a test today and you do not pass, you can schedule to take it again 14 days from today. So it doesn't mean you have to wait 14 days to schedule. It means the next time you are allowed to take it is 14 days from the day that you took it and did not pass. The reason for that is we have to work with Pearson, who does the scoring, and there's some validation and all that stuff, and there are things like lab setup, and that's one of the reasons why we also have to do the scheduling as well. It's not just to penalize you and say, hey, you have to wait because of the score you had. It's also because of the requirements that we have for the lab environment that's used to run this. And the last area I want to cover is...
Sorry, John, so these 14 days are calendar days or business days?
Calendar days is what I was told for the retake. It's not business days, it's calendar days.
Right, so practically, by the time you get the score, it may have already been 14 days from the time you took the test. So you can schedule it as soon as you receive the score for the time that wouldn't be closer than 14 days from the time you took the test.
Yeah.
Right.
Exam security, we do testing in Pearson VUE centers, but there are 3 types of centers. The bottom line, though, for each of these areas that you would go into, each of these testing centers, it requires photo ID, it requires digital signature, and the form of ID must be government issued, and one of them has to be a photo ID. So now we're going to talk about the relationship with the objectives that we have. You know, we basically are trying to measure a number of different areas. They include, are you able to do the job that's related to this particular administration role? And when we actually create the questions, these objectives are verified by other individuals that aren't part of the test creation process. The tasks that we have provide scenarios. Those are broken down into these subtasks. You can get partial scoring, as we mentioned before, and we use the lab for completing all of the tasks. A little on the environment. We use real hardware. We do not virtualize ESX, but we virtualize anything that can be virtualized in a production environment. We do have pre-configured virtual machines for specific tasks. We also have specific configuration tasks and troubleshooting tasks. And in some cases for the troubleshooting tasks, we could have incorrectly configured components or unconfigured components. And some of the lab tasks, as Mostafa and Linus had mentioned, are cumulative, meaning you need to complete certain tasks before you can finish the rest of the tasks for a particular scenario. Now what I'd like to do is go through the blueprints, and these, what I'll do is I'll break it down. Mostafa and Linus, what I'm going to ask is I'll turn it over to each of you for different sections, but I want to make sure we watch the time frame. We should try to see if we can finish the blueprint areas, each of the 3 ones, in about 5 to 8 minutes each to keep us on track for time. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
So what I'm going to do first is go through the first part, which is the VCAP-DCA, the intended audience being vSphere administrators. We have the blueprints listed, the core components, which include the sub-features or the features that are included as part of the vSphere technology. We have some prerequisites. In the case of the VCAP exams, there are no required courses. We have the administration skills, where we have a 9-item pre-exam survey. We have 26 live labs, and we have 210 minutes listed for the test. I will get this updated based on those changes that Linus is getting a note on. I want to make sure they're confirmed first before I make the change. The other thing is scheduling. If you have an exam scheduled for, say, 1 p.m. In the afternoon, You can be seated 15 minutes before or a maximum of 45 minutes after the scheduled time. That's because we have setup for these labs that do take some time and reset takes some time. And if we do not start within a certain window, we run the impact of affecting other individuals that may be testing as well. It's based on the number of resources that are there. Now what I'm going to do is, Mostafa, I'm going to turn over to you the one on the data center virtualization. And what I'll ask is if you can try to fit within, I think we've got 9 slides for this, within about 5 to 8 minutes. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you.
Just tell me when you want to advance the slide and I'll do that.
All right, thank you. So the first section is implementing and managing storage. So basically, all storage-related activities would be covered in this area. It starts with managing complex storage solution, implementing it, and managing storage capacity, and configuring and managing complex multipath and PSA plugins. So all the tasks related to the device, the multipathing configuration, as well as the file system related to configuration would be covered in that area. So the main takeaways in this section would be how to identify read levels. You don't need to memorize those, but if you know where to look them up in the documentation, you'll be able to find it. Supported HBA types and virtual disk formats that would be used in virtual machines, as well as RDMs. So thick, thin, equal zero thick, or standard lazy thick, lazy zero thick, and so on. Use cases of what to use when. So there are certain technologies that may not be widely used, but you have specific application like direct path I/O and NPIV and raw device mapping. For example, for NPIV, you need to know that you have to have an RDM before you can configure NPIV. So that's one of the tasks that you have to take care of first before you can do the task of configure NPIV. So if you don't know that, you won't be able to do this task. VMware signaturing and upgrade considerations specifically related to the properties of the VMFS metadata and so on. So read a lot about snapshot handling for VMFS and how resignaturing is done. In 5.1 has been improved compared to 8 releases, so if you haven't done it in 5.1, brush up on that. And identifying storage provisioning methods. So if you have storage arrays that support thick or thin provision LUNs, you need to be able to identify those so you can make a decision of how you can configure the volume, VMFS volumes on the host side. TSA, if you haven't done so, I think I posted a video about multipath and failover as part of the promo for my book. Otherwise, it's in the documentation, and I have extensive details in my book as well. Understand different multipathing policies, functionalities. You need to understand when to use what, especially round robin. If you're going to have Microsoft clusters, virtual machines that use physical mode RDMs, you need to make sure that round robin is not used by this RDM. But we ease this up in version 5.5, but the exam is for 5.1, so you need to keep this in mind.
Yep.
Next slide.
Yep. Now, by the way, Mostafa, I probably have more takeaways listed that we can cover in the time frame, but I'll let you pick the key ones you think to stress on and explain.
Okay. All right. Then the second section is the networking. So same approach. Same as we did in storage, there's the VM direct path, there's networking VM direct path. And the direction has been that's more towards networking for VM direct path configurations. And SNMP configuration and common switch configurations. You need to understand the virtual switch, standard virtual switch and distributed switch, when to use what and how migration is done. One of the tasks in the exam could be that you would migrate from a standard switch to a distributed switch, and should you remove the remaining switch or not, that you need to be clear on the process and read the task requirements carefully to see if you need to remove the standard switch after you're done with the migration. Make sure that you do that, otherwise you would lose a point or a couple points. Configuring net flow and understanding CDP and NLDP protocols. These are specific to 5.1, some of those options. You need to be familiar with those, and most probably CDP you're going to be using it for identifying some of the information on the network. The VLANs and PVLANs, you need to be able to identify the different types and which the switches support what. So for example, you can do PVLAN with standard switch and so on. So if the task requires that you do that, then you need to know that you're going to have to configure a distributed switch before you can do a PVLAN, for example. And read the question clearly, carefully, because the decision to use a PVLAN is not going to be clearly spelled out in the question, for example. But from what you deduce from what's required, you'll be able to decide, I'm going to need to use a PVLAN. And identifying the VMware NIC teaming policies and common network protocols, especially in combination with other tasks like configuring a software ISCS initiator in the storage side may require you to set up a network before you can do the storage. So some tasks may be spanning multiple objectives. So you would do the network as well as the storage within the same task, but the order of doing them would dictate on how you're going to accomplish the task. And configuring live port moving by port migration, as well as describing the relationship between distributed switch and standard switch. I already covered that in the first point, but that's from the perspective of administration and network area control. No, next slide. Okay, the next objective here, section, is deploying distributed resource scheduler clusters, the DRS, and managing performance. So every single task that's related to DRS, all the way down to the details of configuring resource pools and so on, you need to brush up on all those details, and there's a lot of, probably you will get a lot of questions about resource pool configuration in the context of DRS as well as some other contexts. You need to identify the BIOS and firmware settings, requirements, and drivers, revisions for ESXi host performance, tune in host memory and networking, CPU, and storage configuration. So it's not a straightforward task. You need to be clear or familiar with how these features work and how the optimization is done, so that you can extrapolate from that what are the tasks that you need to do to accomplish a specific goal or a specific target task. Configuring attributes for ESXi hosts and virtual machines and advanced clustering configurations. So these are all specific for host settings as well as virtual machine specific settings, and there are kernel settings and so on. So read up on all the advanced VM kernel configurations that are available and are documented. Compare and contrast virtual and physical hardware resources. Identify memory management and CPU load balancing technologies, and identify how to add features, prerequisites. It's straightforward. For you to be able to accomplish the performance management, you need to be aware of the specific features or components. Explain DRS and storage DRS, affinity and anti-affinity rules. It is very critical that you understand that because the task may not tell you that you need to set up an affinity and anti-affinity rule, but it's just going to tell you, for example, you have this type of virtual machines that have certain dependencies, or they would need to be available at a certain availability, and you have X number of hosts, for example. So you need to understand when would you group the VMs together with affinity rules, and when you make sure that they don't exist together on the same host with anti-affinity rule. EVC requirements is also critical. You need to understand the different types of CPUs and the features in the CPUs, so that way when you define EVC, you'll be able to pick the least common denominators or look at what the actual question is asking you to do. If it's asking you to do using the most servers and you have diverse families of CPUs, then you would have, and you need to have them all in the same EVC group, then you would have to pick the least common denominator. Otherwise, you would need to set up something at a higher level that would isolate the lower end CPUs from the higher end CPUs based on the functionality that you need to accomplish, or the task that's clearly stated to you that this VMs requires such a capability, and so on. And identifying hotkeys and fields used in RESXtop, ESXtop, and VCAP stats. So that reminds me, you need to be familiar with VMA. This is where you're going to use RESXtop, and there are some of the tasks will require you to use VMA. So deploy VMA and work with it and be very comfortable with it, and find all the available commands and tools on VMA compared to directly on ESXi hosts. And the hotkeys, you need to, they're not clearly documented in the UI because it's text-based. You need to know how to switch between views like network and storage and devices and so on, and how to add and remove columns in the ESXtop or RESXtop, so that you can accomplish the task. And you may be asked to save this configuration so that the next time you run ESXtop, it will use that configuration. Next question. Next slide.
Mustafa, we're getting a little bit behind right now, so let's do this. If we can just cover the section, cover kind of the general on the key takeaways, because I think the audience can read it probably fairly quickly as we cover that.
Okay. All right. So this section is for continuity and data protection. So basically, how to protect VMs using FT, using HA, and how to optimize cluster configuration for HA. And you need to be clear on how admission control is done, and when you define HA, how we're gonna provide that. You're gonna use percentage, you're gonna use specific resource sizes, capacity, and so on. And with FT, you need to be clear on the type of virtual disk that it will use and what type of file system it can run on. So if you're going to use NFS, you need to make sure that NFS has support for VAI that would allow you to use pre-allocated virtual disks. Otherwise, you cannot use FT on that. You will have to use VMFS. Perform operational maintenance. So the basic maintenance of an ESXi host and vCenter. So we'll be using Update Manager for deploying patches and deploying updates. And you need to understand how would you create a baseline, how would you check for compliance, and so on. So go through Update Manager in details and the allocation of the Update Manager database and where it's installed and so on. And perform advanced troubleshooting. You'll get some examples where a virtual machine is misconfigured, or someone fat-fingered something, or someone read the unit of measure incorrectly. A megabyte versus gigabyte makes a big difference. Some missing configuration, like a missing network card, or a wrong IP address, or wrong host name, and so on. So I can't cover all the details of troubleshooting, but if you look through the blueprint, we have references to some common KB articles and white papers that gives you some ideas on the basic troubleshooting steps or basic troubleshooting topics. Securing the vSphere environment, you need to understand how lockdown modes and how it's done, and what's when do you need to use which option. And it's not going to tell you clearly in the question, you need to use lockdown mode. It's going to give you certain guidelines or requirements for security requirements, and you need to understand how can it be accomplished by which set of security configuration or what type of lockdown mode. And certificates, creating certificates, this is a critical item that you need to be familiar with. And how would you import those? Where would they be stored? And usually in the exam we'll tell you, here's the certificate, then you need to go ahead and replace the current default certificate with that. For example, you need to know how to do that and where to do it. And using VMware tools to manage VMware data stores, to be able to identify the VMware data store properties, capacities, the type of volume, the type of files on it, the file allocations, and so on. And as I mentioned earlier, you're going to be using VMA, so make sure that you'll be clear on how to interpret the VMA errors. And this section is performing advanced vSphere installation configuration. That's mainly related to custom configurations and auto-deploy. How would you customize the ESXi installation using custom scripts, or using, if you can use auto-deploy, what modes of auto-deploy can you use, and how would you accomplish each mode?
So, thank you, Mostafa. One of the things that you'll see is we try to provide a lot of extra information in the takeaways here. I've got the same amount of information on some of the other slides, but as I mentioned before, there are a lot of other resources. I believe we've got some people that are on the call that have actually worked on the one book specifically for the DCA VCAP. But here's some, I'm going to go through and try to get you some of the background on things like what are some of the recommended courses we have. We've got some listed here: Optimize and Scale, the Troubleshooting Workshop, and Fast Track. Going into the cloud, I'm going to go through that one fairly quickly, and then I'll let Linus cover the desktop. The intended audience here are for cloud administrators, and in particular, the current version is still tied to vCloud Director. In the future, we're looking at determining what do we do as far as the technologies that are incorporated in that. But what we're saying right now is it will be the vCloud Suite, and that may likely include VCAC and some of the other technologies that we've already announced related to cloud. So we've got some of the knowledge areas listed here. The core components are vCloud Director, and how do you develop and manage VApps, the catalogs, the virtual data centers, the networking, and the storage. Once again, there are no prerequisite courses, but you do need to have the underlying VCP level certifications. So the CIA is not a secret intelligence service. It is basically our acronym, which is a little bit challenging, I guess, if you live in certain areas of the world, to have that on your business card. We recommend you put Cloud Infrastructure Administrator. But basically, this is focused on the cloud environments, the areas that I mentioned earlier. There's a pre-exam survey of 9 items. There are 32 live labs. Same parameters apply here, 210 minutes for the length of the test, and then the scheduling, as we mentioned previously. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to read the takeaways, but I'm going to read the course section to kind of give you a breakdown of what you need to look at. So configure and maintain vCloud Director. This is all about how do you make sure that everything is operating correctly. You're looking out for noisy neighbors, through your monitoring. Hopefully you're also using scripting capabilities, maybe Orchestrator as part of helping you do this job. But in the exam, we don't test on those technologies. We focus on the vCloud Director and the suite of products directly sold to support vCloud Director. So in here, we're going to provide labs that are around configuration, management, and troubleshooting for the items that I list here, including the area of chargeback, because that's the managing the financial aspects within the infrastructure. We have the management of the vSphere resources. These are all the underlying items and things that might be different from vSphere solutions in particular. Manage vCloud Director resources, looking at the data centers, the network resources, the different network types, configuration of those specific network types. One key example might be a multi-tiered app that has to cross internet, DMZ, and basically other different areas. So we talked about internal, external, and maybe that demilitarized zone areas. We also look at handling complex vCloud Director networks, also tied into typically 3-tiered environments, but also potentially related to maybe clustering or other types of things that will require more complex networking configuration. Security ties into certificates, LDAP, single sign-on, pretty straightforward there. Looking at managing catalogs and VApps. The construct of VApps in vCloud Director is not exactly the same as in vSphere. And so that's one of the things that we test here. What are some of the differences? How would you create, manage, and maintain that, in particular, inside a catalog? Also looking at customization and understanding the other things to support snapshots or consolidation. Now I'm going to move over to the desktop area. Key overview is that this is for View administrators. We do expect that individuals have done at least one implementation. And the reason is we've gotten feedback from people that go through the exam who've just done the labs or taken the classes. Getting the actual implementation experience is very beneficial because there are complexities beyond just installing vSphere, View, and maybe just one application in that environment. So we look at Horizon View, ThinApp. We look at the whole process from the design implementation all the way through to managing and deploying the desktop images. Quick overview. The 9 items, pre-exam survey, same as the other ones. There's 23 live labs, 180 minutes. It looks like we're potentially increasing that a little bit. We'll get that confirmed. And then the live environment requirements, basically being there no earlier than 15 minutes before your scheduled time and no later than 45 minutes afterwards. So one of the things that I wanted to do is give an opportunity for Linus to talk about this one, because this is one of the newer exams that we have to offer, and there are some things related to the next couple of slides. Linus, you want to go ahead and take it from here for about 5-10 minutes?
Sure. So this exam, much like many of the other ones, you configure the environment, etc. Now, parts of this may have pre-configured portions that you'll have to either upgrade or adjust, and in other cases, they may have blank boxes that you do fresh installs on. We've tried as much as possible to make each of the questions unique and standalone so that they're not dependent upon each other. View, in particular, is one of these areas that if you really do mess up another area, it could potentially have detrimental effect later on. So we tried to, as much as possible, avoid those kinds of things that would prevent that. So it's really important to follow the instructions. Lab environment, very similar to what we have on CIA, and I actually get to proudly say it's actually the biggest of the 3 when it comes to the actual lab environment. Woohoo! So there's 4 ESXi hosts, 3 vCenters, 4 Horizon View connection servers already built, I believe already built, and then there's some additional ones that you'll have in additional VMs. I think Josh told me it was a 52 VMs or 53, whatever it was. It's big. So next slide. So lots of good stuff in that one.
Go. Yep.
Okay. So
it's 6 sections, I believe, right?
Yeah, 6 or 7. I can't remember what the full total is. I had the blueprint downloaded, and of course it's escaping me right now. So we start off with, of course, install and upgrades, right? This is about the ability to install, upgrade, be able to change the environment, configure the environment, etc. This is all about just the View servers themselves. So the 4 servers, which is the transfer server, security server, the connection server, and replica servers. So your ability to configure those and build them up into the environment, as well as upgrade them. How would you upgrade the environment, kind of thing. So fairly straightforward. Next. Configure and administer the View components. This is about the View interface, administrative interface. So how do you do various things like global policy, user role, syslog, the event, the View event database, etc. how do you restore an environment? So we actually have a quote-unquote dead environment that we want you to restore, kind of thing. And how would you do that? And then also configure location-based printing. So that's the GPO kind of settings, be able to configure that table, etc. Next. Deploy, manage, and customize a pool implementation. So this includes link clones or full, and terminal servers and manual provisioned pools. We'll have you set those up and do optimized performance. We have some storage that's configured to be identified as high-end storage, sort of like an SSD, medium tier, and low tier. So we've sort of created storage for you. When you actually create it, this is the area I was talking about. You need to watch, read the instructions. You may have some warnings about not actually deploying it, that you may need to sort of disable provisioning. So watch for those. Because otherwise it could have an impact on performance of the environment, and it's really important to pay attention to those instructions. So you'll end up creating both full and link clone pools, both dedicated and or floating within the environment. So lots of good stuff. May also have to do 3 R's, the refresh, recompose, or rebalance as part of it. Again, we'll probably tell you not to do the provisioning, but probably just to do the initial configuration and leave it as a later setting kind of thing. Next. Deploy desktop images. We're not going to ask you to install Windows 7 or whatever from scratch. We may have an existing one and want you to optimize it and improve the performance on it. And also applications. So when should you natively install versus having, say, a FinApp, etc. So we'll have some little FinApps that you would either use or full install versions of applications kind of thing. Next. So this is about the FinApp repository and being able to provision out a FinApp through the View environment, through the repository. So knowing how to configure your FinApps for this, hint, 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 take a look at your package set INIs for that kind of stuff. It's a fairly straightforward one, but also then things like GPOs, et cetera, if we want to allow particular apps or not allow them. Next. Configuring and optimize the view display. So this is about the GPO for PC over IP in particular, but also RDP sessions that we need, and how you would actually take a look at metrics for optimization. So where would you look at them, what things you're looking for, et cetera. So there may be some configuration things we have you set up for that. Next. The endpoints. Now, the reality is we cannot get you to say, show us how you would configure a zero client or anything like that. But we do have you do some, installs of, say, a View client on a Windows system. I don't know if we have the Linux ones in there. Local mode, those kinds of things. Configurations for the client, configure it for a specific way, GPO settings for the client, etc. As well as silent installs. Next. Securing the environment, this is about certificates, so your ability to configure SSL certificates, the smart card and two-factor authentication, and again, this is not a scenario where we'll give you a smart card device and you have to configure it to work with the environment, but rather, can you do the necessary back-end settings to configure it? We'll give you with the necessary files or pieces that you need, and then you go put them in the right place kind of idea. Right. And then, of course, firewall ports, etc. Next.
Oops, sorry.
Yep. There we go. Persona management. This is about deploying persona management. So this is, again, more GPO stuff. Setting up the repository, putting in the right permissions for the repository, watch for your permissions. That's usually the biggest one. And then using the MIG profile to go from XP to Windows 7. I did have a question of that from somebody recently who was trying to go from Windows 7 to Windows XP. It doesn't work that way. You can only go from version 1 to version 2, not version 2 to version 1. So those kinds of things. Next. Troubleshooting, because of course everything works perfectly fine. How would you troubleshoot, this issue or that issue? So as part of those 4 connection servers, one of them will be actually deliberately broken, and we'll have some pools, if I remember correctly, that probably don't work either, and we ask you to fix whatever's wrong with them within the environment. So you have to make them work, as it were, kind of thing. Next. Is that it? That's it.
So what we're going to go into now are the examples. Thank you, Mustafa and Linus, on that area. I'll let you guys jump in as you see appropriate for these areas. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about VCAP administration labs. There is a number of different places you can go to get tips on building your own lab. One of the things that we call out is building it on your laptop. You can use Fusion, Workstation, or if you have other virtualization tools you use, feel free. But the idea here also is to use the hands-on labs. When we look at doing a creation of ESXi hosts, whether it's physical or if you want to play around in a virtual ESXi environment, think about doing fresh installs because we want to look with a clean, clear, native, we call it virgin environment, so that when you go through the exercises and start trying to do your own exercises, you have that clean slate to start with. A couple of things that people do ask us, and Linus had mentioned a little bit about the size being roughly around 50-something gigabytes. Here I'm giving you the details on the DCA test track in particular. The details showing 50 gigs powered off. There's 2 ESXi hosts. These are physical hosts. And then we have these other application servers or management servers that will run as virtual machines. And we also have some nested machines built into there. But the idea is the labs are thin provisioned, and basically the VMs created in the environment may change in size based on how the test taker runs through the exam, meaning you may deploy more or less VMs, you may change certain configurations that can influence the total amount of space that's required. So you have to think about that when you're building out a lab environment to play around with. Here are some of the software that's included with the current versions of the lab. I don't have every last one of these updated for the new changes that are coming. We'll try to update that as they come out. But the bottom line is the blueprints provide details around a particular track, and the matching version of these technologies will be the one that you want to focus on. To my knowledge, these are the best match that we have right now for the exams. And you'll notice particular versions are mostly tied to the 5.x releases, 5.1 or higher. So one of the things in this lab environment, for those who haven't taken the test, we give you a virtual machine, and we call that the Control Center VM. In there are tools to help you solve the scenario. You shouldn't need to install any additional tools. That's one of the reasons why we don't have the internet access. But we do provide that documentation, as I mentioned, in a folder, and we'll show you what's in those folders shortly. So we're going to give you 3 examples, one example for each of the tracks. So I'll give you this one, and we'll talk about it. Linus and Mustafa, feel free to jump in. Others can feel free to jump in too if they want to provide additional input. But here's the scenario. You're trying to improve storage performance and reliability, and you've been requested to enable iSCSI multipathing in a vSphere 5.x environment. You have also been requested to make sure any iSCSI database created on the array in the future defaults to using the round-robin multipathing policy. We give the IP address to use for this exercise. Also at the bottom you'll see there's a vCenter server name, an administrator account name, and a password. And some of the requirements that we have are enabling iSCSI multipathing on a particular machine, and ensure new data storage created on this iSCSI array will default to the round-robin. So how do we approach this? There could be a number of different ways. Here are the high-level general ways, and then I'll let Mustafa go ahead and explain the details. We're looking at 2 key distinct parts for the question. One is on the iSCSI multipath, and the other one is changing the default selection policy. So once again, referring to this question, it's in the scenario. You need to extract that information and recognize this is what the question is asking for, the multipath and the default path selection policy. So Mustafa, I'll let you go ahead and run through the next 2 slides.
All right, thanks, John. So this slide shows you the steps that you would follow to perform the network configuration that's required to provide multipathing for software iSCSI initiator, which basically goes through the process of port binding. So you're going to need to make sure that the NICs that you're going to use are not in a team, because if they are, you won't be able to actually bind the port, and determine whether or not you're going to be creating a new vSwitch that you would use these PNICs or add PNICs to the existing virtual switch. So you're going to have it separately, or you're going to have it within an existing one. That's going to depend on how the existing switches are configured and how the existing NICs are used, the PNICs are used. So if you have pre-NICs available that you can have two NICs assigned to a separate switch, you're going to go ahead and do that. That's best practice. And then you do the port binding and so on. And then you create the vim kernel port for the iSCSI storage, and do the port binding there. Next slide.
There we go.
Okay, so for the path selection policy, that's the PSP. You're gonna need to if you're gonna set up the PSP on a per device basis, then it's not gonna affect any other devices presented from the same array. So you're gonna need to use command line options like ESXLI storage, for example. So you're gonna need to once you create that on one host, if you have multiple hosts, you can easily create a host profile and apply it to the other host. That will make it, will do it faster.
Okay. So we got another scenario. This one is for the cloud. A similar approach will apply. I'm not going to go through all the details in here because, once again, this is going to be based on your skill set and the particular track that you take. But in this case, we're asking for a change in company policy that requires vCloud Director and vCloud Networking and Security logs to be captured. Your architect will automate this process at a later time, but is requested that you collect the first set of logs manually. So we've got two requirements listed. Save the latest vCloud Director log to the Control Center desktop, and the second is save the latest VCNS log to the Control Center desktop. We've also provided environmental information on the vCloud Director cell and the vShield Manager. And when we look at the approach, we need to use both the vCloud Director and the vShield Manager software. In one particular case, we need to run a script which will create an output that we actually need to use and save it. We can use WinSCP to copy that to the Control Center VM. The other one is using the vShield Manager to go through and use the settings and reports area to basically generate the logs and basically get that saved out and transferred as well. We have another scenario that's described here, which is the vCloud implementation team has configured two cells for testing purposes, VCD3 and VCD4. Testing is concluded on VCD3 and is almost completed on VCD4. You've been tasked with shutting down the cell testing that's completed and ensure that no new task can be started on the other cell. So we're talking about requirements for shutting down VCD3 and ensuring no new tasks are started on VCD4. And there are several components in this. When we look at it, we need to quiesce the VCD3 cell first and then shut it down. Then we can quiesce the VCD4 cell so no new tasks can be started on it. And below this, we've actually included the actual steps that you would take. We don't have screenshots for this. These are basically walking through the steps that are taken. Because basically screenshots are going to be a little bit more challenging to demonstrate. But does this, I just want to get a touch base and see if the audience thinks this is helping them understand what to expect for the exam. Is this working well?
Yeah, I would say that if you like where this is going, raise your hand within GoToWebinar.
Cool. Let me know, because we still have some more to go through. We're going to be a little over on time here, but thank you. I think Josh had said that I think you guys are forgiving on the time. We've got a lot to cover, but once again, we'll have the full set of slides. What I want to do is give Linus a chance to run through this particular one. I'll read it, but I'll let you do the walkthrough, Linus. Is that okay?
Sure.
So the scenario is there's a new pool that has demonstrated poor performance when displaying videos on deployed virtual desktops. An administrator has captured a perfmon log and saved it to the desktop of the control center server. We need you to analyze this log and make necessary changes to the GPO settings for the organization unit to allow for better virtual desktop video performance. We do not want you to enable provisioning on the pool, so we've got a constraint there. We've got some requirements that are listed. Analyze the captured perfmon log. We provide that actually as a PNG file on the desktop, and modify the GPO settings of the OU to meet the stated requirements. Below that, we've listed out some of the environmental information and the credentials. And Linus, I'll turn it over to you on doing the walkthrough of this scenario.
Sure. So as I had been mentioning before, there's some steps that will have the do not provision. This is one of those. And the reason is that when you go through and fix it, it could potentially have an impact if you actually did provision it. So we don't want you to do it. So if you look at the image file, from the image file you'll be able to take a look and see, oh look, the frames are going out of whack, and realizing that these are just average users, you probably don't need it, and they max out at 4. So in this case, the frames are actually are going too low, and we would want to reset it back to its default value, which for PCRP is actually 30. So if we go into the GPO, edit the max FPS value, which is the frames per second value, that will bring it back down to its 30, which should be able to do what it needs to then at that point. Next.
So we got a second scenario, and in this case we've got a view administrator that discovers that the option to enable view storage accelerator on the engineering pool is grayed out. You are tasked with troubleshooting and fixing the issue. The requirements are determine the reason the view storage accelerator option is unavailable, and then we want you to take steps to enable the view storage accelerator on the engineering pool. We provide you the environmental information, and then Linus, I'll turn it over to you to talk.
So in this case, it's the vCenter server that doesn't have it enabled. You actually have to enable it through the view interface, through the view admin interface. If you go under the admin, under servers, I think it is, or configuration, then servers vCenter, choose the vCenter in question that's relayed that this pool is associated with. In there, you'll see the option, you'll enable it there, and once that's done, then you can enable it on the pool. That's it.
Now, we have interactive simulations for all of these certification exams. We've got them for the VCAP design as well. In this particular case, you go to the vmware.com/go/VCAP and then the 3-letter acronym for the exam that you're sitting for. These are about 10 minutes each. Now, the last area that we want to cover, just a few slides, it's talking about planning study sessions. So many people who have been successful say they work in teams with others that are interested in pursuing the certification, and they don't let geographic boundaries stop them. So I know some people who've gone through and created a study group that was within one VMUG, for example. And we've got some other people who work with people across the world in different countries together on the studying because of the time frame that they all wanted to take the exam in. So we want you to focus on installation, configuration, administration, and operations. The installation part, I want to say one thing. VCP covers the core installation. Think of VCAP as covering some of these added features as far as the installation goes. Mostafa, do you want to add anything on that particular area? Or Linus, either one?
One thing to add, the DTA simulation is still being worked on, so it should be out soon, but not up just yet, I think.
Yeah. Cool.
So, but otherwise, yes, everything else makes, hands-on, hands-on, hands-on.
Exactly. Hands-on is the key for success on this exam. Utilizing the tools that are provided in the blueprint, we mentioned that before. Also consider using VMware Press. I'll give a shameless plug for Mostafa's book because that actually provides a lot of detail on the storage side. We have comparable books on networking, but there are also publishers outside of the VMware Press area where you can get some very good books to help you in this area. Scott Lowe's book is one example. There's a number of other people. I think there's a few on the call here that have also published some books as well too. And at conferences, we give a discount. Typically, it's 50% off for the exams. Some resources. VMware resources are the administration blueprints. The website actually has links to these. It also has links to the simulations. We also recommend VMware press books or related books covering VCAP, like the one that I believe Josh Cohn and is there one other person on the call that worked on that book as well? And I think this is the VCAP-DCA.
Yeah, it was Jason Langer and Josh Cohen.
Perfect. Jason Langer and Josh Cohen. Great book. If you're pursuing the DCA, has all the deep dive material that we just can't cover in a short boot camp like this. VMware classes. There are classes that will support you. We have a mix of classes these days. We have instructor-led in person. We have instructor-led online. And we also have self-paced learning. At the VCP level, we've got something we call the GenHen series of training. This is a particular person who actually helped us develop the computer-based training. Sorry, say it again?
Sorry, the official name is the on-demand classes, not the GenHen.
The on-demand classes. Thank you for correcting me. Sorry, you got some inside information.
Is really excited about that.
Yeah, but we really like what this person has done on creating the material, and we hope that you'll like that as well. The other thing too is self-paced learning is available through books as well as through online, and there are some people who have published, on the YouTube environment. And of course, I'll give a big plug for the vBrownbag team because you guys have a great series touching the VCAP certifications that go into that deep dive. Our focus here is giving an overview and talk about the questions and give some examples there, but those other sessions on vBrownbag go into the deep dive around specific areas, and I think you'll find that is very, very complementary and very essential for success. We also recommend the KV articles and white papers and some of the technical notes that are out there. There are some documents on getting up to speed very quickly and doing a proof of concept deployment. And the last area that I'll call out is the hands-on labs, as I mentioned before. Now, I think somebody was going to jump in. Was that Linus or Mustafa? Somebody else?
No, I think that was me commenting about how awesome the brown bag is.
Yeah, we have authors and speakers on here right now that worked on those. So definitely, we're proud to be part of that team that's helping to develop this enablement opportunity.
Absolutely. And I know that, as the organizers, we're definitely glad to have you guys, as well as the audience, because you guys are always a good hit whenever you come on. So thank you.
We have fun. Hopefully you guys like our humor. But anyways, here's something that was not intended to be humorous. It just happened to be I gave the wrong resolution on the screenshot for this version of the deck. So in this case, let me explain it if you can't read it. In here, we're showing for the Control Center VM, the file that has the documentation you can use as a resource. This is for the DCA. It includes installation, configuration guides. It's got things on storage, networking, availability, and so on. In this particular case, I think there might be one or two knowledge base articles, but most of this one has documentation from the product. The next one on DTA includes product documentation, but also some white papers, some reference material that's used on helping with both deployment and management and operations. Some of the best practices, for example, is listed here for Horizon View as another example. And then when we get into the cloud, we've got the install, the user guide, we've got some of the administration guides, and we also have some extra resources like around networking, resource, and storage. Now, these will likely change as we go forward and come out with new releases. But within one particular exam, as long as it stays as one version number, we won't change the files or the structure of how we run that test. The next release is where we might add or remove documents or update documents. So your mileage will vary. Now I also wanted to call out the external resources. You can see at the top two that I have on the list for DCA are the unofficial official VCAP-5-DCA study guide and vBrownbag. There's a number of other ones I have listed here, but I've looked at what you guys have put out in both areas. we looked at trying to find something complementary for this boot camp to actually help people get a whole complete picture going forward. And I think that study guide in particular, many people have told me how valuable it's been for them to complete the exam. Next area is on external resources. The Staffing Geek has some really good study guide information, which also references other areas. Of course, there are the brown bags in this area, the Wall Network, vInfrastructure blog, VDOBs. My apologies if I left anyone out. If you know of a great resource in this or the other categories, drop me an email at johna@vmware.com and I'll be sure to add it in. I will validate the ones that come through, although we can't guarantee that the websites might change, so that's why I have that disclaimer at the top. On desktop, I've got the vInfrastructure blog listed, I got the View Composer Link Clone Technical Deep Dive listed. What I'm looking for right now is to see, do you guys have desktop included as part of your vBrownbag series? Is that something you're considering? I think somebody had mentioned earlier, I think it was Damien, that you were trying to find some speakers on that area.
Yeah. You know, over the past couple of years, from time to time, I've had folks come up to me, and I know the other folks involved with the podcast have as well, where people have asked about the VDI or View or Horizon or whatever you'd like to call it. They've asked about that kind of content, and one of the difficulties that we've had is finding presenters. You know, to actually work
you've got a great presenter on here who's also an instructor. And Linus, by the way, I volunteered your name earlier. I figured this would be something that you might be interested in helping too.
Sure, no problem. I actually don't mind. I mean, you open the door and I will not shut up. It's a downside of being
So what we've established is Linus hasn't been listening to the vBrownbag podcast.
Yeah,
hey, but I brought him in.
I've been certifying instructors, that's why.
Well, then good. You can bring the instructors in.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, we're going to help you out on that. We'll make sure that you guys can.
And there's no fame, but thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to close with that and say that we are going to be offering a full day of boot camps, starting with VCAP Admin, then VCAP Design, and then VCGX at Partner Exchange, Saturday, February 8th. But I'm still working on trying to get the people who aren't attending PECs that are testing to be able to participate in the VCGX boot camps. I'm hoping that I'll have good news on that. I want to let people know that going forward, we are going to also have, just like the VCGX boot camp, which we did on vBrownbag as well, we're going to have a professional, I guess I'll say, video of going through this, and maybe actually have some online screenshots of somebody working through a test using some of the expired exam questions for obvious reasons. The other thing is, going forward, I think for the most part, we're going to be looking at doing full-day boot camps, just like what we're doing at PECs. We just did it, Mustafa and I were doing it in Dallas and in San Jose, Costa Rica, and they worked out very well. They were very successful. The one challenge I'm working on is figuring out how to cover the blueprints and fit it within a 1.5-hour time frame. So I may massage that a little bit with help from both Mustafa and Linus, but we're looking at continuing to do some more updates on that over the next quarter as well. But the good news is, between all three of these boot camps, we've now covered all of the advanced certification areas, and there are some secondary things that are being worked on right now. That includes several different books tied to VCAP, also some additional books that are tied to design level, in particular one that is going to be working on the VCDX methodology, which may apply also to people pursuing VCAP Admin and VCAP Design. So just watch for that. There'll be more postings on that. Also, a piece of feedback that I'll look for from the people that are on the call right now. If you have feedback on anything that you think we can do to add or change or remove from this presentation, whatever, I am open, as I always am, to any feedback. We'll do the best that we can to accommodate all of that, but the goal is to try to put this in a way to help not just the people who are currently taking the test, but people who are thinking about it in the future. Maybe they're they haven't even started the VCP level, This is for helping people understand what's involved in these certifications, what the value prop is, what the expectations are, and maybe some of the challenges and how to actually get through those challenges. So I'll open it up to any additional questions, or if Mustafa or Linus want to add any additional things on at the end, we can do that.
Hey, John, while they're thinking, there are some questions in the questions pane that's assigned to you.
Okay, let me see here. Let's see here. I think the last one that I had covered was from Dan McGee, so I'll look at the next one, Graham Mitchell. It says, if you have 2 failures, how long must you wait for the next time? You know, I don't know that offhand. I think it's more than 15 calendar days or business days, but I don't recall exactly.
It's
Does
30
anyone
at
know?
that point. 30.
30? 30 days after that second one. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll go to the next one. This is from Kyle. Is it safe to assume a rewrite of the exam is going to also cost full price?
Yes. There's no discount if you retake. No.
Yeah, you mean, is the question, though, retaking it or rewriting it? I mean, it costs us the same to develop the exam. I think it must be to take the exam. Is that?
Yeah. That's what I would interpret as, unless and Kyle can certainly adjust accordingly. But if you retake it, unless you get some special discount from your VMUG or anything like that, it's assumed, even though you are retaking it, it's treated as the first time, as it were.
Can I call you after I get off the call?
I'm not sure.
Okay, I'll call you.
If they are, we can reach out. Oh, sorry, Mustafa. I guess we heard you. Sorry, I thought you were talking to us. Anyways, humor with it. That's okay.
Off the line.
No worries. I'm going to go through. I think I have one more. It shows from David Sheridan. When mentioned vSphere 5 being used in the VCAP-5-DCA exam, does that refer to vSphere 5.0? I believe it's actually 5.1.
No, it's 5.0.
No? Oh, it is 5.0. Okay, so we haven't updated that one yet.
Yeah, that's the one that's being worked on, and hopefully will be out sooner than later. They're working on it, I believe, and I know I'm going to get an email from Josh, tell me otherwise, but I believe they're working on it for the next release to be 5.5.
Sure.
So they're working on it as hard as they can, as fast as they can, but there's only so many hours in the day and only so many bodies to throw at it.
That sounds good. Cool.
Okay, so in this case, I made a comment earlier during going over the blueprints. I mentioned there are certain features were enabled in 5.1, so you need to be careful with that. So base your references to 5.0 documentation.
Yeah. Always check the blueprints for the exam you're taking for the exact version numbers.
Yeah. And like, for instance, for DTA, we list 4.6 view as well as, I think it was 5.1 view as the ones. And the reason, obviously, is that those upgrade questions, right? We needed a point to start from to do upgrade kind of thing. So it's not necessary that you need to know the views 4.6 interface, not that there was that huge of a change between the two, but just more to understand, you know, that ability to do the upgrade between the last big version and the more recent big version, as it were.
Yep. Very good. Oh, I got one more question I see from Mark. Is there someone I can talk directly about an exam experience that I had? I have some specific questions about the kit setup and objectives. Yes. How about, I recommend this. If you want to reach out to me, drop me an email, johna@vmware.com, and I can get you in touch with the right person. I think it might be John Hall. I know he's on Twitter, but I don't have his handle offhand.
It'll also be dependent on which exam it is as well. Depending upon what the situation is, it may be Josh or maybe someone else, but certainly we'll find the right person.
Yeah, he's actually referring to the VCAP-DCA.
Yeah, no, it's still maybe
John Hall. I think that'll be John Hall, but also it might be a specialist on there as well that's working on the infrastructure.
Yep.
See, any other questions? I know we got a few people that are up pretty late. I'm not sure. Damien, you're on the East Coast, right?
No, I'm Central.
Oh, okay.
It's only 9:19. And plus, I've got a call with Hyderabad in a few hours, so I got to stay behind.
Okay, so I think I think we've actually covered all the questions. I want to thank you guys for having us on again. I think this is the third in our certification series. I know there were multi-parters before, and I'm hoping that the next opportunity we'll have is to actually talk about some new things that are coming that we're trying to develop, including something that we are tentatively calling Academy X to actually help people fast track. I'm not saying it's a shortcut, but it's a way to identify what you need to do to make sure you're ready for the VCDX certification. So that's something that I'm hoping I'll be able to talk about in the next 2 months or so. Okay. All right, I guess I'll turn it over to Damien and Josh for any closing remarks. Thank you guys again. And thank you, Mostafa and Linus, for helping. Yep.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, guys. And
Sure, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everyone else for sticking around. This is coming up on 2 hours. If memory serves, one of the last ones we had this long was Andre Lebovici doing like this huge view deep dive thing a couple years ago. So before we close up, does anyone have anything else? If not, we can go ahead and wrap the podcast and have a good Wednesday evening. Going once, going twice. All righty. Oh, Mark, John Arrasjid's email is johna@vmware.com.
Yep. And by the way, all three of us on the call right now, Mostafa, Linus, and myself, will be at PEX. We will be running the boot camps on the Saturday, but we'll be available during the week. If you're a vExpert and you're participating, or a VCDX and participating, hopefully we'll see you on the Tuesday night for the special event. I'm going to be bringing some special guests, which I can't really announce right now, but they're not technology people. They are, let's just say, they're helping to be stewards of the world's environments. I'll leave it at that. You'll have to show up to hear more.
Hey, Linus, if you're still on the line, what is your Twitter handle?
At Linus Bork. So LINUSBOURQUE.
Cool. Thank you. All righty. Well, I think that covers everything. Thanks, everyone. If you are going to Partner Exchange, myself and a few of the other vBrownbag guys are going to be there, so feel free to find us. It's a relatively small show in comparison to VMworld, so it should be easy. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great Wednesday night, and we will see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.